People in the audience whispered softly, wondering what they had just seen. The cameras were pointed toward the bright stage lights, and the interviewer was ready to speak. But before the first question could even begin, KeanuReeves did something unexpected. Instead of facing the interviewer like everyone expected, he slowly turned toward Sandra. He looked at her as if the whole world was quiet. And in that moment, everything changed. It began earlier that same evening. Keanu was invited to a big talk show event. It was loud, flashy, full of laughter and excitement. Everyone knew Keanu as someone calm, kind, and humble. But tonight, something about him felt different. He seemed thoughtful, quieter than usual. He kept looking around, like he was searching for something or someone. Sandra arrived 15 minutes later. She was smiling, greeting people, and trying her best to look relaxed. But deep inside, her heart was heavy. She had been going through a difficult time. Not many people knew about it. She was carrying the weight of something personal and painful. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes showed a story of quiet struggle. Keanu noticed it instantly. They had known each other for years, always staying connected in small but meaningful ways. Sometimes they would talk for hours about life, art, grief, love, and loneliness. They understood each other because they both carried wounds that were not loud or dramatic, but soft and deep. They understood how it felt to smile while hurting. As everyone settled into their seats, the host welcomed the audience and spoke proudly about the upcoming interview. Keanu and Sandra sat next to each other on the couch, lights shining above them. The cameras rolled, the audience clapped, and the interviewer smiled wide. But Sandra's hands were shaking gently, hidden in her lap. She tried to hide it. She took a slow breath, but Keanu saw it. And that is when it happened. The interviewer began asking something about a recent movie, but Keanu did not answer. Instead, he turned slowly toward Sandra. Not dramatic, not loud, not for attention, just quiet and honest. His eyes were warm, soft, full of care. He whispered, so only she could hear, "Are you okay?" Sandra froze. The world around her kept moving, but for her, everything stopped. No one had asked her that in a long time. Not truly. Not with real concern. Everyone expected her to be strong. Everyone expected her to smile. No one asked if her heart was tired. Her eyes filled with tears she tried so hard to hide. She nodded at first. A small, quick nod. Like a reflex. The kind people use when they are used to pretending they are fine. But Keanu did not look away. He said softly again, "You don't have to be okay right now." The interviewer paused. The room fell quiet. The audience leaned forward. They knew something real was happening. Something human. Something without acting. Sandra took a breath, and her lips trembled. She did not cry loudly. Just one tear fell. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. But Keanu gently shook his head, telling her with silence that there was no shame in feeling. It was a moment of pure kindness. The kind that does not need applause or attention. The kind that comes from understanding pain. And in that silent moment, the entire world watching felt something. Because all of us, at some point, have needed someone to quietly ask if we are okay. The silence felt heavy, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where truth finally has space to breathe. The interviewer looked unsure, glancing between Keanu and Sandra, trying to decide whether to continue the show as planned or allow the moment to unfold. The audience held their breath. No one wanted to interrupt what was happening. Sandra exhaled slowly. She had been holding so much inside that even breathing felt unfamiliar. She looked at Keanu, and her voice was barely a whisper. It's just been a lot. Just those few words, simple, quiet. But behind them was a whole world of exhaustion, heartbreak, and overwhelm. Keanu nodded, not trying to offer solutions or advice. He understood that sometimes a person does not need to be fixed. They just need to be seen. And Sandra, in that moment, felt seen. The interviewer gently cleared his throat and spoke softly now, no longer trying to perform for the cameras. "Would you like a moment?" he asked. Sandra shook her head. "No, I'm okay. I just needed to hear that." Keanu gave a tiny, supportive smile. One that said, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The show continued, but it moved differently now, slower, more human. The questions became less flashy and more thoughtful. Instead of talking about fame, success, and red carpets, the conversation shifted to life, resilience, and the quiet ways we survive difficult seasons. The interviewer asked, "What helps you keep going on the hard days?" Keanu took a moment before answering. He did not want to give a rehearsed response. He wanted the truth. "I think," he said slowly, "we keep going because somewhere inside us, there's still a small light, even if it's dim, even if we can barely feel it. We don't need to be strong all the time. We just need to hold on to that little light. And sometimes, we need someone to remind us it's still there." The audience was silent again, listening, absorbing, feeling. Sandra nodded. Her hands had stopped shaking, but the night was not over. There was more beneath the surface. After the show ended, the lights faded, and the applause settled. The audience left, the cameras turned off, and the studio grew quiet. Sandra stayed seated for a moment, looking down at her hands. Keanu remained beside her, not pushing her to speak, not trying to fill the quiet. Finally, she said, "I'm not sure how much longer I can pretend I'm all right. Everything feels overwhelming. I feel like I'm disappearing." Her voice broke on the last word. Keanu listened, truly listened. "No judgment, no fear. You're not disappearing," he said softly. "You're exhausted. There's a difference, and exhaustion can be healed. But disappearing, that only happens when we face pain alone. And you don't have to do that." Sandra wiped her eyes again, but this time she did not hide it. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. Keanu shook his head gently. "You are not a burden. You're a human being who feels deeply. And that is not something to be ashamed of." They sat together for a long time. No cameras, no performance, just two people trying to stay standing in a world that often demands strength, even when the soul is tired. And then something unexpected happened. Sandra reached for his hand, just to feel something steady. But Keanu's fingers tightened around hers with quiet certainty. A small gesture, but sometimes a small gesture can save someone. The night air outside the studio was cool and calm. Distant city lights flickered like stars brought down to earth, and the traffic hum felt softer than usual. Sandra and Keanu walked side by side, not rushing, not speaking yet. Sometimes silence says more than words ever can. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to keep from falling apart. Keanu noticed, but he didn't reach out right away. He understood something important. Comfort has to be offered gently, never forced. Healing only happens when the heart feels safe. Finally, Sandra stopped near the curb and looked up at the sky. "I've been trying so hard," she whispered. "Trying to stay strong, trying to smile, trying to keep going. But it's like every day takes more from me." Keanu turned toward her, his voice low and steady. "What happened?" he asked. Not to dig, not to pry, but to understand. Sandra single quotes as throat tightened. She hesitated, as if the words were heavy stones she'd been carrying too long. "Someone I care about is sick," she said finally. "Really sick. And I've been trying to show up for everyone, to be the strong one. But I feel like I'm falling apart when no one is looking." Keanu's face softened with deep empathy. He knew the weight of illness, of grief, of losing and almost losing. He stepped a little closer, not touching her yet, just near enough so she didn't feel alone in the night. "You don't have to carry all of that by yourself anymore," he said. "You don't have to be strong every moment. You're allowed to hurt. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to rest." Sandra exhaled shakily. It was not relief, but it was the beginning of being able to breathe again. Just then, a group of fans across the street recognized Keanu. They called his name, excited, waving their phones. Sandra immediately stepped back, wiping her eyes fast, her mask returning. She prepared herself to smile, to be fine, to hide. But Keanu did something unexpected again. He did not turn to the fans. He did not wave. He did not smile for the cameras. He stayed facing Sandra. He didn't look away from her pain, not even for applause, not even for adoration, not even for fame, and that spoke louder than anything he could have said. The fans hesitated, confused. They saw the situation and quietly backed away, giving space instead of attention. It was a rare moment of respect in a world that loves to look but not to understand. Sandra's breath trembled. "You should go," she whispered. "They're waiting for you." Keanu shook his head softly. "Not tonight." His voice was sure, calm, unwavering. "Tonight, I'm here with you." Her eyes filled again, but differently now. Not with the pain of being alone, but with the shock of finally being supported. They walked again. Slower this time, until they reached her car. Sandra paused before getting in. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice small, as if afraid of the answer. Keanu thought for a moment. The street light above them flickered gently. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said. "And it changed everything. Pain can make us close our hearts. Kindness can help open them again." Sandra looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. It was faint, delicate, but real. And real is enough to begin healing. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu gave a soft smile. "You're not alone. Remember that, even when it feels like you are." She nodded, holding his words close, because sometimes one moment of genuine care can stop a person from drowning. Days passed, but the moment they shared did not fade. Instead, it stayed with both of them, quietly echoing like a soft memory that refuses to leave. Sandra went about her schedule, smiling when needed, speaking when expected. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt like she was drowning alone. There was someone who saw her, someone who stayed. That mattered more than she knew how to explain. Keanu, too, carried the night with him. He had always been gentle, always thoughtful, always paying attention to the unseen parts of people. But the pain he saw in Sandra's eyes had touched something deep inside him. He knew what it felt like to lose, to carry grief like a silent shadow that never lets go. He understood the kind of exhaustion that doesn't show on the outside, but slowly eats away at the heart. One afternoon, Sandra received a message from him. "Are you free to talk? No pressure, no demand, only a soft invitation." She hesitated at first. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open up more, but she also knew that pretending she was fine had only made her suffer more quietly. So she called him. His voice was calm, the kind that makes you feel like the world is not as loud as it feels. "I was thinking," he said, "maybe we could get away for a few hours, somewhere quiet. Nature helps sometimes." Sandra didn't want to burden him. She didn't want to seem needy, but she also felt tired of being brave alone. "Okay," she said. They met at the edge of the city, where the tall buildings slowly gave way to open sky and trees. Keanu had chosen a small hiking path he visited when he needed to breathe. It was peaceful, filled with the soft scent of pine and earth. The world felt slower there. As they walked, Sandra spoke, not fast, not dramatic, just honest. "I wake up every morning fearing the phone will ring," she said. "I keep thinking, what if today is the day I lose them? I don't know how to prepare for that. I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to hold on either." Keanu listened, letting her words settle into the quiet air around them. He didn't rush. He didn't interrupt. After a moment, he spoke. "When someone we love is hurting, we feel like we have to control everything, like we have to fix it or stop it. But sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is just be there. Not to save them, but to love them through whatever comes." Sandra felt her chest tighten, not from fear this time, but from release. The kind that comes when someone speaks a truth your heart has been quietly waiting to hear. They sat near a small flowing stream, listening to the gentle sound of water moving over stones. Sandra closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt still, but the peace did not last. Her phone buzzed. Her heart stopped for a moment. She looked at the screen. Her breath caught. The message came from the hospital. Keanu saw the way her expression changed. He didn't need to ask. "We should go," he said softly. She nodded, her entire body trembling now. They walked back to the car. The world suddenly felt sharp again, to real, to fast, to heavy. On the drive to the hospital, Sandra stared out the window, her thoughts spiraling. Keanu reached over and gently placed his hand over hers, grounding her, not pulling her back, just reminding her she wasn't alone. When they arrived, the hallway lights were harsh. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Sandra took a deep breath and stepped forward. Keanu walked beside her. Whatever waited behind the door, she would not face it alone. The hospital hallway was cold and too bright. Every sound echoed: footsteps, soft voices, the distant hum of machines. Sandra's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. She stopped outside the room door and froze. Her hand hovered near the handle, but she couldn't move. Fear had wrapped itself around her chest. Keanu didn't say anything at first. He simply stood close enough so she could feel his presence. Sometimes strength is not loud. Sometimes it is just someone standing beside you when the world feels like it is falling apart. Finally, Sandra pushed the door open. Inside, the room was quiet. The person she loved lay in the bed, weak and pale, but still breathing. Still here. Sandra felt her knees weaken with relief. Tears rushed to her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. She moved to the bedside and took their hand gently. "I'm here," she whispered, voice trembling. The person opened their eyes slightly and smiled, even though it took effort. "I knew you would come," they murmured. Keanu stepped back, giving space, but not leaving. He found a chair in the corner and sat quietly, watching with a soft, steady calm. He knew this moment wasn't about him. He was there to support, not to take space. Sandra spoke softly to her loved one, telling them everything she couldn't say over the phone. She apologized for the times she couldn't be there, thanked them for their strength, and whispered how much they meant to her. Her tears fell, but they were gentle tears now, not of panic, but of love that had been waiting too long to be expressed. After a while, the nurse came in and asked Sandra to step outside so they could check the patient's breathing. Sandra nodded, wiping her face carefully. She walked out, and the moment she stepped into the hallway, the exhaustion hit her. Everything she had been holding back came crashing down. She leaned against the wall, pressing a hand over her eyes as tears fell freely now. There was no hiding them. There was no strength left to pretend. Keanu walked to her slowly, like approaching a bird with a broken wing. "Gentle, patient, safe, breathe," he whispered. But she couldn't. The fear, the guilt, the love, the grief, all of it tangled together inside her chest. It felt like she might break apart. Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to lose someone I love." Keanu's expression softened with a pain he didn't speak out loud. He understood. He had lost before. He had watched life change without warning. He knew the kind of grief that never fully leaves. He stepped closer, carefully, giving her a moment to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like someone holding something fragile and precious. Not to trap, not to control, but to anchor, to remind her that she was still here, still breathing, still alive. Sandra buried her face against his shoulder. She didn't try to be strong. She didn't try to be graceful. She just let herself feel. "Keanu," she whispered, voice shaky, "I'm scared." He held her a little tighter. "I know," he said softly, "but fear means you care, and caring is brave. You are brave, even when you don't feel like it." She cried, but it was different now. Not silent, not hidden. It was the cry of someone finally letting themselves break so they could start healing again. When she pulled back, her eyes were red, but something inside her felt clearer. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu gently brushed a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I'm here because I care." They stood together in the quiet hallway, the world still heavy, but no longer impossible, because pain shared is lighter than pain carried alone. Morning sunlight filtered softly through the hospital window, painting the room in a gentle, warm glow. It had been a long night. Sandra stayed by the bedside, holding the hand of the person she loved, her head resting lightly near their arm. Keanu sat by the door, quiet and watchful, like a guardian who didn't need to speak to be present. The doctor entered with slow steps, carrying a calm expression. Sandra braced herself. She had learned that some news changes everything in a single breath. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the back of her chair, grounding her again. The doctor smiled softly. "Their condition has stabilized," he said. "They're still weak, but they're going to be okay. They just need rest, time, and support." For a moment, Sandra didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't react. It took her body a moment to understand. And then her shoulders shook. Not with crying, but with relief. She covered her face with both hands and let the breath she had been holding for days finally escape. Keanu exhaled too, his chest loosening as if he had been holding her fear alongside her this whole time. When the doctor left, Sandra turned to Keanu, her eyes shining with tired but real hope. "Thank you," she whispered again. Keanu shook his head gently. "You walked this. You stayed. You loved. I was just here." She smiled, a real smile, not the kind she forced for cameras or expectations. It was small, soft, almost fragile, but it came from the heart. After a while, they stepped outside to get fresh air. The sky was a clear pale blue, and the morning breeze felt like a long-awaited breath. They sat together on a bench under a tree near the hospital garden. No one recognized them here. No cameras, no noise. Just quiet and honesty. Sandra looked at her hands for a moment, then spoke softly. "I thought I had to be strong alone," she said. "I thought if I asked for help, it meant I was weak." Keanu listened. "But I think maybe strength is letting someone in." Keanu nodded slowly. "Strength is not carrying everything. It's knowing when you need support." She looked at him, really looked, not as the world saw him, the actor, the movie star, the legend, but as a human being who had felt his own losses, his own quiet battles, his own slow healing. "I don't know how to thank you in a way that feels enough," she said. Keanu smiled, gentle and honest. "Just live," he said. "Love, heal, that's enough." They sat in silence again. But this time, it was not heavy or painful. It was peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after surviving a storm. In the days that followed, Sandra made time for herself. She talked to people she trusted, allowed rest, allowed softness, allowed emotion. She began to heal slowly, not perfectly, but genuinely. And Keanu stayed in her life, steady and quiet, not as a savior, not as someone fixing her story, but as someone who simply cared, someone who reminded her that being seen is a form of love too. Their bond did not need labels or loud declarations. It was built from moments of honesty, shared silence, and understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures hold the greatest power. And people who watched the night of that interview, who saw the simple moment when Keanu turned toward Sandra instead of the interviewer, kept talking about it. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. And real moments are the ones that stay in the heart.